What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are live on YouTube and on Twitter for the first ever episode of The Hawk's Nest. And I'm joined by none other than the Murder Hawk monster himself, AEW star Lance Archer. Lance, what's going on, brother?
What's up, man? I want to welcome everybody to the first edition of the Hawk's Nest. And right now, we're kind of in my Hawk's Nest. If you can see a little bit of my memorabilia behind me, I'm hoping that we can bring a lot of fun content to everybody that's listening, watching, and paying attention, and that this just grows and grows and grows, and then we take over the world, and it's the Hawks world.
I mean, it's inevitable, I think. We've got Lance Archer, we've got me, which is probably way less of an incentive. But no, man, I could not be more thrilled to be here for the first ever episode. And
Let's do this,
man, before we get into talking about your origins in
Oh, my
wrestling,
God. All right.
which I sent you the notes, and there's some great stuff in there. I can't wait to dig in.
Yeah, we'll see.
But before we do get into it, I want to tell everybody who's joining us now, and I'll do a periodic reminder as we go. If you have a question for Lance as we're moving along here, by all means, throw it out there, and throw it out there under the super chat, because that is going to guarantee that we will ask your question here on the show. So pry open that wallet, motherfucker. We're having some fun here. We want you to be part of it. Lance, you cool with cursing on this podcast? It's your show.
Let's fucking go.
All right, let's fucking swear on this thing. Who cares? But man, I can't wait to talk about your origins. However, you and I were talking a little bit before we got going.
All right.
We were talking about NFL football, and I was like, "Hey, you're from Texas. Got to be a Cowboys fan if you're watching here." He's not a Cowboys fan.
Let's go Chargers. They won today. Beat the Raiders. Let's go.
All right. How'd your boy Herbert do? I didn't get to see it.
I think he actually got one. I didn't get to see it either because the silly Cowboys were on TV in Texas, and you can't watch any other game while they're on TV.
It's America's team.
Who? No. Yeah, I didn't. I think he did all right. I think he threw one touchdown, but the NFL has a lot of great players with some fun names. But the LA Chargers have probably the greatest kicker name ever, and it's Dicker the Kicker. And he was on fire today. I think he kicked like five field goals or something like that.
I mean, with a name like that, you cannot be anything else in the NFL except for a damn
Dicker the Kicker, kicking the crap out of the ball. There you go, buddy. Actually, I have a fun lag. So Alex Marvez that's with AEW, right?
Yeah.
Great dude. Knocked him on his ass a few times in different promos and whatnot. He kind of hooked me up with some of the PR team with the LA Chargers, and this was a couple seasons ago, and they were like, "Yeah, anytime you can come on out to the game." Wasn't able to go out that first season. Last season, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, they're playing the Cowboys," and he was like, "You should come out." It was a Monday night game and everything. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. It's like the one night I don't have to worry about anything, no travel or anything like that. So I didn't think it was going to get canceled. Sure enough, I hit up the team. They hooked us up. Brad Williams, which I'm hoping Brad will join us on this podcast one day. He's great. An awesome comedian. If you haven't seen Brad Williams, go look up his stuff. He's a really, really cool dude. He's unfortunately, he's a Denver Broncos fan. But he lives out in LA. So I hit him up, my friend Charles Rice, who lives out there, Chuck, who used to be an intern at TNA way back in my early days. And we all went out to the LA Chargers versus Dallas Cowboys game. The whole reason of bringing this up because I was just talking about Dicker the Kicker, they put us in one of their ground level suites, the field level suites, which is awesome. But you can't see anything. Even with their, they have the big circular screen in the SoFi Stadium. When you're looking up at it, the field lights are pointed right down towards you. So you're kind of looking into the light. So it's even hard to look up into the screen. And when you're looking at the field level, you're like, oh, this is cool. I get to see the players. You really don't, because they're all in their station box where they can go, and then it's all the media and everybody. It's just so many people that are standing in front of you. You can't even see the field. But we did get to watch Dicker the Kicker and the punter just constantly practice their kicks for basically an entire game. So he's always warmed up. I'll tell you that much.
All right. Well, look, we got to get you a Dicker the Kicker jersey at some point. It sounds like he's your guy.
Yeah.
Now, before I promise, guys, we'll get into wrestling here in a second. I do have to ask you, though, Jim Harbaugh is now the coach of your team. What do you think about having that maniac in there?
I don't know. It's kind of a wait and see. Let's see what he brings to the table. You know, he has an energy, obviously already, like through the training camps and whatnot, where he would do a lot of the same practices and workouts that a lot of his players would do, which you don't see a lot of coaches doing. He's already had some success in the league. He obviously had success in college with Michigan last year and everything. And I think he brings a new energy to the team. So I'm hoping that translates and keeps going. Like I said, they won today. Not the prettiest of wins. Luckily, said again, Dicker the kicker kicked the crap out the ball. 5 field goals and a touchdown from old Golden Boy himself, Herbert. And I'm just hoping they can compound on that, and the season's an awesome one. Because they're one of those teams that they lose so many games by like 3 points, and you're just disappointed. Like it's like, oh, again, this is horrible.
Well, you got this badass kicker, and by the way, Lizzie Bailey is saying she wants to hear just a full episode of Dicker the Kicker talk. So Lizzie,
of course she does. Of course she does. I know Lizzie.
Maybe down the road, Lizzie. You know her?
Yeah, Lizzie. Actually, here's fun. Lizzie, early days, she created like a website for me, and like it was an attempt to create a place for fans to go, possibly purchase merchandise, get information about shows and upcoming events, and so on and so forth. And I'm pretty sure it's down and dead at this point, but she helped me out. She's a longtime fan and friend.
Well, I'm glad that she's in here along with Darren Staley, Larry Johnson, a handful of other folks. And I know you folks are going to keep pouring in as you do. Just
tell all your friends, come watch us.
That's right. Everybody get in here and let's do that super chat if you want to guarantee your question gets asked. All right, Lance, without any further ado, I know what everybody's waiting for. They want to hear about your origins in wrestling, and we are going to deliver today. So little background on you, according to the research. By the way, huge shout out to Andrew Hermes, who does the research here for the show. He's
Thank you, Andrew.
Great researcher and an awesome guy. Love me some Andrew Hermes. So yes,
I don't know Andrew, but thank you, Andrew.
Andrew knows you, big fan, just like
appreciate you, Andrew.
So Lance, you grew up in Texas, and it looks like you were a hell of a high school athlete: football, basketball, baseball. What can you tell us about growing? I mean, Texas, it's a sports state, right? All the best athletes seem to come out of Texas. What was it like growing up there with that competition level?
Al Bundy ain't got shit on me. No, I'm just kidding. I went to a very small school, so it wasn't like, when you hear about Texas football, you hear about these mega schools, and I think when I was in school, which was eons ago, like some of the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, like they call it, the late 1900s, I think 5A was the biggest the schools went to, and then they went to like super 5As, and now I think we have even 6As, because a lot of these schools, like districts, came together and combined and made these insanely massive schools. You can see different like reels and videos of these multi-$100 million, high school football stadiums, that most colleges don't have and whatnot. And that was not my school. And actually, probably going to be at it is Hearn High School, Hearn, Texas, down near O'Brien College Station. They actually announced me from Hearn on AEW TV, and we're doing our reunion this year. I'll leave the year out of it because it's a lot of years ago. But they're doing the homecoming game this Friday, and my plan is to fly in, get to the house, change, get everything ready, and then drive down to Hearn and go enjoy the homecoming game for the Hearn Eagles. Hopefully they kick some ass. And I think they're a 2A school now. We were 3A when I was there. So I'll be down there for that. But yeah, the competition wasn't the greatest. Like, our school was more of a basketball school than a football school. We always had a really good basketball program. So I played because there just wasn't a lot of people to be playing, but we had some really good players, especially on the basketball team. And most of the guys and girls were all multi-sport athletes, because again, we didn't have enough athletes to fill squads. So if you weren't playing multiple sports, if you weren't playing football and basketball and then straight into baseball, which is what I did, or track, or whatever the sports that we actually had were, and a lot of the sports didn't even get seen or played in our school, again, because we didn't have so many students. Football was just my passion when I started in high school. I wasn't even considering pro wrestling as an option of where I wanted to go. I wanted to play football. I was a quarterback. I worked really hard. Like our stadium would have one light shining down on one of the goalposts in the field, and I would take a tire and I would literally hang it from the goalpost and take 4 or 5 footballs out there, and it'd be 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'd just be out there by myself, dropping back and throwing passes at this tire, because I was like, oh, this is how I can get better. Because I really didn't have any other option. I didn't have a lot of friends that could go out at that time of night or whatever, because everybody had different jobs or they had different sports they were playing and whatnot. And ultimately I got my starting position my senior year, which was the only year I started. And then I tried to play college ball, which never really worked out. And that's probably a good thing as far as my pro wrestling career is concerned, because that's what ultimately led me into pro wrestling.
Now, you're obviously really huge guy. Had you hit your maximum height already by high school?
No. I mean, I think I graduated when I was 18. I was probably like 6'4", 6'4.5", or something like that. I'm ultimately, until I landed on my head not too long ago, it was probably a little over 6'6". But around 6'6" is where I stopped growing. I think that was probably in my mid-20s.
Now, you would go on to play quarterback in college, of course, Southwest Texas State, and we had in the research it was West Texas State. I'm like, dude, that's where like DiBiase went. It's where Tito Santana went. All these wrestling greats. I was like, Lance Archer, all right. And then you saw the research and corrected us. But so I mean, it's the mid '90s, and you're out there under a scholarship.
No.
No, you weren't.
No.
Oh, okay. Tell us about how you went.
No scholarship. No. And my first 2 years were at a smaller school called Howard Payne University, which when I was there was NAIA, not even NCAA 3, which I think that's what they are now. I did my first 2 years, played one season, and then my second season I dropped out because back then, like the NCAA had pretty strong transfer rules. Like if you were going from one school to the next, especially if you're going up a level, you would have to sit out a year. So things weren't going great for me at Howard Payne. So I knew I was probably going to be transferring out. So I dropped out my second season on purpose with the idea that if and when I got an opportunity somewhere, I could go right in, which actually did happen. And then I transferred to Texas State University, was Southwest Texas State when I was there. And then ultimately the school is now called Texas State University. And they're now a full-on Division I school. They were still Division I AA when I started. But I did get invited to their as a walk-on, no scholarship. As a walk-on, I got invited to their training camp, their 2-a-days or whatever you want to call them back in the day, back when there weren't a lot of restrictions on that. Things were different. Like I said, I wasn't a scholarship kid. I was simply a walk-on, which, again, all this stuff, as football was my passion, because it happened the way it happened. I was a kid who just was on the sideline a lot, threw a lot of passes on the sideline, but never saw any game time. A lot of practice squad stuff, a lot of scout team quarterback stuff. But ultimately, because it just didn't work out, and actually ended up having a surgery. I had a pilonidal cyst removed when I was at Texas State during 2-a-days. And while all that happened and going into the school year, it really affected my grades. And so my grades dropped, and then the school actually suspended me from the team because, they want to keep their team level GPA up, and mine had dropped so drastically. And because I wasn't somebody that they cared that much about, they were like, yeah, till you get your grades back up, you're suspended, which I got them back up. And then when I went back in the spring, like it was not a very warm welcoming. And it's kind of what led to my exit from football.
Now, we've also got here in the research that you were seeking a degree in English. Is that right?
I have that. I mean, if I left the screen, I could go get my diploma that I've never won. It's collected a lot of dust. It's here in my office. Yes, but I have a degree in English. It's just a bachelor's degree, but I have a bachelor's degree in English.
Now, I'm guessing that when you're first coming in here, you're like, I'm going to prove myself. Eventually, end up in the NFL. That was like probably your hope. If that had not panned out, and obviously you hadn't found wrestling, did you want to be like a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of the plan. That was the idea, was just, teacher and coach, played football. And then obviously if you with the grander thoughts and dreams, you were like, I'm going to play NFL ball and whatnot. And there weren't as many like offshoot leagues. what is now the European Football League, which at one point was the NFL Europe. Before that was called the World League of American Football. And that was one of the really only offshoot football leagues at the time, like when I was playing and coming out of college and things like that. So the options were very limited. There was no indoor football leagues. There was not a lot of like semi-pro leagues and things like that. There was just not very many options. These NFL or bust type scenario. So with my situation and not being a very good player, or anyway, what the coaches thought anyway, yeah, I think the idea was ultimately to become a teacher and a coach, be a English teacher and coach football. And again, if you're at a smaller school, you're coaching several sports. You're not just coaching one. And then, who knows, that may still be my end goal path when this whole wrestling thing is done. Who knows?
Imagine fucking Lance Archer as your English teacher. I'd read the Scarlet Letter or whatever the fuck you wanted.
That's the scary part about being a teacher today. Like these teachers are beyond underpaid and they're underappreciated in ways that's just insane to me in 2024. We want our kids to be more educated, more rounded, more progressive, and things like that for a future that should be brighter for everybody. But we provide teachers with so little assistance, so little help. So many teachers are spending so much of their own money and they're not even making any money just to keep their classrooms running smooth because they love their students. They're amazing, special people. And I think our world and society as a whole should be taking care of them better. But the fact that they deal with so many things in this day and age, I mean, I still grew up, when I was even younger, like grade school and junior high, where the boys would get their butts whooped. Like if you went to the principal's office and you did something wrong, principal had different paddles up on the wall and he would whoop your ass, and your dad gave him full permission because then he whooped your ass. When my dad did too, when I got home. And like I said, and that's the funny part, like I have my opinion on it. I never got beat as a child, but I got my ass whooped when I did something wrong, and it taught me. And you can't even barely speak back to these kids anymore without somebody getting mad at you like you did something wrong when the kid is the one who's acting out in the first place. And so I don't know if I could be a teacher in this day and age. I'd end up getting in a lot of trouble is what I'm saying.
Man, a thankless job. God bless my wife. She's a teacher. And
oh my goodness. Well, you hear all about it then.
I get to hear all the stories, and I say what you just said all the time. Like, nope, I would never survive in that. She's like the most patient human being I've ever met. Like, there's zero chance I'd be able to have a job for more than probably 6 months in that industry. So, God bless you, honey. Yes. So you had mentioned before when we were doing a Murder Hawk mailbag, which you can find in the archives, either on the Snake Pit or on the 1TS YouTube channel. But you had mentioned before that while you were in college, that's when you started to first watch wrestling.
Yeah. Well, actually, high school. I mean, I started watching in high school before I got to college.
And Sting is the guy that really stuck out to you.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen the new Crow movie, which I've not heard very many good things about. And that's unfortunate. I love movies, man. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, but I've seen a review on it because I'm like, hey, The Crow, I gotta check this out. And I watched like a review without spoilers. They're like, nope, don't see it. So it was horrible.
Yeah, and that's very disappointing because I think at one point like Jason Momoa is ear hold or ear, what's the word? Earmarked to play the part. Like I think he shot like a little like teaser or something like that, kind of like an audition for whatever. And so I think there was a lot of like exciting buzz around the idea that Jason Momoa was going to be the next Crow, the next
I would totally see it.
Eric Draven, right? And Bill Skarsgård is an amazing actor. Like I take nothing from him. Him and his whole family are awesome. I haven't seen it yet, but I've not heard anything good about it. Anyway, the original Crow movie with Brandon Lee was something that was really, when I started really enjoying cinema and whatnot, was probably one of my first and most beloved movies. I still somewhere, I don't know where it's at. It might be at my family's house, something like it was an Italian poster and it said Il Corvo, for the Crow. And it was really cool. And then Sting took on that persona with the face paint and, the rafters and all that stuff. And I don't even remember how I ended up seeing it. I don't know if maybe I was just passing through and saw him in full face paint, went, wait, what? And then stopped and watched it, and then have just obviously been hooked ever since. So, and it's been really cool to kind of work with him at different points in my career too. Really cool dude.
Now, you and your buddies were like skipping Monday Night Football as a football player so that you could
Yeah.
watch like Raw or Nitro.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In my dorm room, we would have wrestling night, and we would have like usually we would hook up two TVs, and actually we would run because you'd only have one like cable jack in one room. So basically, we'd have two TVs, and we'd go buy the longest like cable jack we could, so that we would hook up a second TV, and you'd run it from one room to the next because we'd be next to each other, just so that we have two TVs up, and you were watching WWF, Raw's War, and then you're watching WCW Nitro, and we have both TVs set up right there watching them at the same time.
Hell yes, dude. Those were the days. I was only like 12 years old and kind of like the middle of the Monday Night Wars, but I remember
Yeah.
flipping back and forth between the channels, and it was a really exciting time.
Yep.
And I would guess that once like the football thing stops, kind of working the way you wanted it to, that's when you started to eye what local wrestling schools, presumably.
No, actually, that's the crazy part. Like, so yeah, and back to the college thing. Yeah, it was these massive 20-inch box TVs, by the way. Um, um, no, I was just a fan. Like wrestling had stopped. I was in school. I was working in nightclubs in Austin, Texas. Started at a place called Inferno. And then I switched over to a late night club, which was called like Abrados. And then Abrados ultimately turned into this place called the Voodoo Room. And I was security most of the nights, but on Saturday nights, because we built like a stage in front of the DJ booth, I got all painted up and I was the witch doctor because I can dance. I can dance my ass off. And if you're a fan of my TNA days, you saw me doing some dancing back in the day. Anyway, so that was kind of what I did. And the guy who owned the nightclub, he knew a guy that had started a wrestling school. And I think I'd actually, so a little backtrack there. Um, I did look for a school because I signed up to join Shawn Michaels Wrestling Academy in San Antonio. And the crazy part was like, so they did their first school, their first group of students or whatever. And I think like Brian Danielson was a part of that. And, a lot of I think Lance Cade, and then one of the guys who ultimately became one of my best friends in life, his name was Jeremy Sage when he wrestled, but his real name was CJ. And CJ is now the principal at a high school in San Marcos, Texas. So that's
Oh,
cool for him. Yeah. But anyway, so I signed up for the school and I would have been a part of the second class ever, which at that time Shawn was heavily involved in. Shawn was heavily involved in the first few classes, like the first, second, third, and maybe the fourth, I think he was involved in. Then he had his kid and some stuff happened or whatever. And then he went back to wrestling, or he went back to WWF at the time, I believe still. So he wasn't there as much. But anyway, so I would have been a part of the second class, but I just had a car accident probably a few days prior, to his mom, who ran, the books for the company, and kind of would call people and say, "Hey, you've been invited now to the school and whatnot." Um, she calls me, and I'm not injured or anything, luckily, thank God. But my car's totaled. It's sitting in the parking lot, and I'm waiting for a claims adjuster who had just showed it at my house. And like literally, she called. I answered the phone. She's like, "Hey, this is Carol with the Shawn Michaels Wrestling Academy, and I'm just calling to let you know that you've been accepted into the school, which will be starting in October." And I was just like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, I don't have a car right now." And she's like, "Oh, do you think you can get a car by the time the school starts?" And I was like, "Maybe." I was like, "But how much is the school?" And she's like, "Oh, it's $3,300." And I was just like, "Yeah, I don't have $3,300." She goes, "Oh, don't worry, you don't have to pay it all up front. You can pay it in three easy installments of $1,100 a month." And I was just like, "Yeah, I don't have that either." And I don't have a car right now, so really won't have that at that time. And she's like, "Oh, well, I'm so sorry to hear all this. If something changes, you get back in contact with us, and we'll get you in the next class we can." I was like, "Yes, ma'am, no problem." And then, I kind of thought that was the end of my possible wrestling dreams. And then again, I go back to, at that point, I'd kind of given up on the idea of looking for school because there wasn't a lot back then. And a guy had opened up a wrestling school in Austin, Texas, and it was called the Southwest Wrestling Federation. And to his credit, it was a small little warehouse, and he had a ring set up, and he had some weight training stuff and whatnot. Nothing big, nothing great, nothing fancy. But he convinced you. He's like, there's WWF, or I don't remember how he classified it. It was like, there's WWF, there's WCW, there's ECW, and then there's the SWWF. So he made you believe that his company was the fourth biggest and best company in the world. He's comparing himself to WWF and WCW and ECW, which was running hot back then. And then there's the Southwest Wrestling Federation. And I went and did a tryout, and it was the most painful thing I'd ever done in my life. I've been playing all sports, football, baseball, basketball, those things. And, even in football, which everybody's like, how is it tougher than football? Well, I was a quarterback, so I didn't get hit a lot. Um, yeah, I went in and I did this tryout, and they had me bumping and dropping elbows and doing leg drops and probably a lot of things that I shouldn't have even been doing in a tryout. Most tryouts are like, all right, let's see if you got any kind of cardio and just try to blow you up to see if you're willing to even stick around for the idea of possibly getting in the ring, because they know if you get in there, and then because they know it hurts when you hit the ropes, it hurts when you take your first bumps, it hurts. All these things hurt, especially the first time and you've never experienced it. So I'm sure a lot of people would just never come back. And that was almost me, actually. So the guy who started the school, his name is J.O. Murillo. Like, I remember he called me and he's like, hey, man, so are you ready to start this schooling? And a little backtrack on the SWWF. When I joined, JL owned the place. There was the guy who ended up being my trainer. His name was Solo Faitala, and really only one other guy. His name was Jason Baker, who I still talk to periodically today. And that was all that was a part of this school. But before that, JL had a partnership with Ivan Putski and Scott Putski. And in actuality, the Southwest Wrestling Federation, when it first opened, was where Paul London started. But Paul had left by the time I got there. So he'd already started to branch out. He'd gone to Florida for some training. He was starting to work with Rudy Boy and those guys down at Shawn Michaels Wrestling Academy. But yeah, he'd started at the Southwest Wrestling Federation, but with Ivan Putski and Scott and whatnot. And then by the time I got there, all of them were gone. I don't know what happened. There's probably 10 different stories, but yeah, ultimately Ivan and Scott and his brother Brent, I believe, I can't remember, they were all gone. So again, it was just me, JL, Solo, and really just Solo most of the time, and Jason and I. And Jason and I just beat the crap out of each other every other day, and did like a 45-minute to an hour drive to and from, where I lived in San Marcos to this place in North Austin. Which was all the way on the other side, because San Marcos is kind of in between Austin and San Antonio going south. So I drove all the way from San Marcos to North Austin to this wrestling school. And we just beat the crap out of each other. And that was kind of my beginning stages of professional wrestling. But yeah, when JL called me, he was like, all right, you ready to start doing this? I basically tried to chicken out because it hurt so bad that I was just like, there's no way I'm going back. But I didn't say that. I wasn't going to be a little bitch and say, oh, that hurt too much, I'm not going back. I was just like, oh, man, yeah, this and that. Because I think his school was probably like $2,100 total or something like that. That was the advertised cost. And I just told him, I was like, I don't have $2,100, man. I'm a college kid. I've got a basic, bouncing job in Austin, and I'm still going to school and blah, blah, blah. And maybe I can make it 2 days a week. And he was like, okay, yeah, the 2 days is fine. He goes, what can you pay? And I go, $200 a month. And he went, all right, let's go. So now I kind of backed myself into this corner of saying I would pay $200 a month and come twice a week. And he's saying, all right, let's go. And now it's either telling me it hurt too bad and I don't want to do it, or I just buck it up and see what happens. And that's what I did. I was like, all right, I'm not gonna punk out on this too bad. I'm gonna see where this goes. And if at some point I just don't want to do it, don't like it, then I haven't lost that much. And to my mom's credit, she was very helpful in that. My dad's always been an amazing man, and he took care of me, but he was very adamant on the school part. He was like, that's great. I'm glad you're finding something you want to do, but I really want you to make sure you stay in school and get your degree and so on and so forth. I was like, oh, that's no problem. But my mom was very helpful in paying my exorbitant amount of $200 a month so that I could pretend to fight.
Now, I think a lot of people are going to hear this and say, like, well, he's a big guy. And to your, like what you said before, you played football, you're a bouncer. Like, you're no stranger to physicality. Lance, how would you describe your first experience taking a bump? Like, what would you compare it to?
Um, the comparison has always been the same, and I think it rings true because the first time you do it, it's like getting in a car accident over and over and over, and you're choosing to do it because you're
Yes.
choosing to throw your ass on this hard mat. Because, I mean, if you don't know, like a pro wrestling ring is not the softest thing in the world. You think it might be, but it is not. It is a steel frame. It's a suspended steel frame, which gives it some give depending on the ring. I've been in some rings that did not give at all. And it's a steel frame, and then it's got 2 by 12 planks of wood or uh, 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 most of the time that's what it should be, is 2 by 12 planks of wood. And then you might have a little bit of a canvas, or excuse me, you might have a little bit of a padding, and then usually have a canvas over it. And like the ring I started in, the padding was was carpet padding, and just as many pieces as they could find, and they just kind of stretched it evenly across the ring and then covered it up with a mat. Like there was nothing good or professional about it. It wore down really quick and didn't give you much of a padding at all. So it hurts a lot because you throw your ass on that mat, that canvas. And one of the things that we're taught when you first start is you need to attack the mat. And you do that because the harder you hit it, the more it actually will give, the more it will move. So getting that wrapped around your mind of, you're thinking, oh, I want to catch myself. And if you catch yourself, that's when you start hurting your hands, your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, whatever it is. Um, if you just will get that fear out of your mind and throw yourself on your back as hard as you can, tuck your chin so you don't smack your head on the mat, which you will do many times before you figure it out. It hurts every single time.
So I'm about 6 months into training, and every once in a while, because I'm still focused on the moves and what's coming next and stuff, somebody
Mm-hmm.
will pick me up for like a back body drop or whatever, and I won't
Mm-hmm.
tuck my chin,
Oh
and
yeah,
it
yeah,
fucking hurts.
yeah, and then you won't remember anything.
Right? That I'm just like, okay, I just talked to the guy. I'm like, what's next? Just tell me. I'll do
Yeah,
whatever you
we've all
say.
been there. We've
Yeah.
all been there.
But man, it's how long do you think it took you for your body to get like calloused and ready for the ring, where it wasn't so punishing anymore?
Um, I mean, I was having fun with it, and I think that's the thing. Like, I mean, I was, like I said, it was the most painful thing, but playing sports, I think, gives you kind of a mindset of pushing through the pain, and if you're having fun doing it, and, like I said, my schooling was me, Jason, and Solo most of the time. It was those three people. So it was very one-on-one most of the time. Like different people would pop in periodically, and we'd have a few more people sometimes in the classes and whatnot. But for the most part, it was just the three of us. So we kind of made a bond, a friendship. Wasn't a lot of distraction. It was just us. So the attention was all with me and Jason and Solo. So I think that helped me just for the simple fact that it was kind of like I didn't have to sit around and wait and watch anybody else, and I wasn't getting passed up because somebody else was doing better than me or whatever, or there wasn't like some schools and proper schools will make you do certain things for a long period of time before you even start moving on and advancing and doing more advanced things. And this was just a very informal school. And Solo taught me well, but it was just like, cool, you can bump. Now let's do a back bump. Let's do a front bump. Let's do a flip bump. Let's do a backdrop. Let's do a body slam. It was like, and every time you completed about 3 or 4 of them safely, then you moved on to the next thing, which now looking back wasn't the best training. But it just helped me kind of keep moving forward. And I actually had my first match like a month after I started training. So way, 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 way too soon. And a lot
Wow.
of that, yeah. And a lot of that was just because, and you don't know any better at that time. Um, at that time, I was just like, oh man, I get to have my first match and in front of people. And, um, and I'll take it back. My first like in front of people, which this is a fun story in itself, was talking about football earlier. So my first initial or my first official wrestling match in front of people was a part of like a battle royal, but it was in front of 5 people in 105-degree Texas heat, July 5th of 2000, because we were part of the pre and post show entertainment for a semi pro football league that had just started. And sure enough, we have the ring set up before the game, and like I said, it was 105. you could throw a bucket of water on the mat and it would be evaporated within a few minutes. The duct tape that was used around the ropes, the hard steel cable ropes, was melting off of off the cables, and literally like before the game there was like nobody there because it was so hot. Like the game started at 7, but in Texas 7 o'clock in summertime there's still 2 hours of sunlight. It doesn't even start going down until 8 or 8:30, and so there was nobody there, and we were trying to do this pre-show or pre-game battle royal match, and that was my introduction to pro wrestling. And then my first real match, like actual singles one-on-one match again, was not too long after that, and it was a part of like a car show that was going on, and I wrestled this guy named Tarzan Taylor, which he's passed away now, and like he was like, "Don't worry, kid," and like he worked the crowd up so much because he would never get in the ring. Like he would always do that. I'm going to get in the ring. No, I'm not doing the ring. I'm getting in the ring. No, I'm not doing the ring. And they were so mad that by the time that he got in the ring, 15 minutes later, as soon as I punched him, they just went nuts because they just wanted me to see me beat him up, which of course he beat me, pile drive me into the mat, within 5 minutes of actually wrestling. But that was kind of my original introduction. I probably have a video somewhere, and I remember because one of my friends was recording it, on an old school camcorder, and there was somebody sitting close to him, and he was the guy that was not my friend. You could hear him in the background go, "Lance, what kind of name is Lance for a wrestler?" And he's like, "That's my friend." And he goes, "I don't care if he's your friend. What, that Lance? That's a horrible wrestling name." Like this is the running commentary for my first ever real professional wrestling match. With some dude who hated the fact that my name was Lance, because my first name in pro wrestling was Lance Steele.
Lance Steele.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a badass name, right?
I like it. Lance Steele. Hey, look, if you do have that, guys, you've got to get over to Lance's YouTube channel. He's starting to build it now. It's called Murder Hawk TV. So get over there and check that out. You're actually going to be able to catch the replay of this show over there, the nice finished post-produced version. But Lance, if you've got that video, you got to throw it up there on the YouTube.
I have no idea where that thing is, man. Like I said, that's old school VHS camcorder stuff, man.
Okay, it might be hard to digitize.
Yeah.
Well, maybe someday.
One day, maybe.
Now, before we do move off training, Andrew put something really interesting here in the notes that I do have to touch on. Getting chopped. Your first time getting chopped. What can you tell us about that experience, and what did you think of it?
It hurts like hell, man. and the dude who was doing it, Solo Faitala, was like a half Hawaiian, half Samoan dude who's they're just thick-bodied, stiff-handed, tough sons of bitches. He's an amazing person. He actually, so have you ever watched The Deadliest Catch?
Yes.
Those guys that are out on those crab boats or shrimp boats or whatever they are out in the middle of freaking North Atlantic.
A shit job that pays really well because you could fucking die while you're doing it. Yeah.
He does that now. That's what he does now. That's how tough this old son of a bitch is, because he goes out he's on the boat for a month and a half or whatever it is, out in the middle of the North Sea, and like comes back, like I said, makes great money. But that's how tough this son of a bitch was. So so when he was chopping me, it was just it was horrible. It sucked. But that's probably why my chops are as horrible and sucky for other people now.
Do you often break people open with your chops?
I think I'm kind of nice because I like to get one massively big chop in, and if it sounds like I want it to sound, I keep on moving because I don't want to screw it up with a bad one. But usually that one is strong enough and bad enough that most people are just like, "Thank God you didn't hit me 18 times."
Real quick, we've got John Redondo here. He says, "Lance,
what up, John?
Brother, hope we can do a full dive on that WWE run from ECW because the story with the hair needs to be heard. We are going to talk about all
it. It's been heard before, but we'll definitely tell it on this platform as well.
We absolutely will. And look, I want to remind you guys, if you do have a question, go ahead and hit us with the super chat. That'll guarantee that your question gets asked. Darren Staley said earlier, love Brad. And it's my One True Sport anniversary. We've rebranded. We're One TS. So no longer One True Sport. Anyways, moving on here, Lance.
What's up, man?
It says you made your debut in 2000, and according to our research, you at one point wrestled under the ring name Shadow.
Yeah, I've had a few names in wrestling. Actually, it's been one of my like, I think it's kind of fixed now and people find it pretty easily now. But like when people on Twitter possibly would go, please follow me, please follow me. I'm like, cool. Tell me all the names I've used in wrestling and make sure they're in order. And most of the time, everybody tries to go to Wikipedia, and Wikipedia may have it fixed by now, but for the longest time they didn't have it all there. And so yeah, Lance Steele was my first name. Then I had a glorious name of Breakdown down in the South Texas area, and then Shadow became my third, and probably one of my most beloved names in my early career. It actually almost ended up being my first name in TNA, but didn't. But yeah, so like when I wrestled in the Dallas Fort Worth area in a company called PCW, Professional Championship Wrestling. They, when I first started, like they originally started in Dallas, and like Gentleman Chris Adams was like one of their main coaches. And they had a wrestling school and stuff like that. And he's the one that convinced this family to start this wrestling promotion. And they had like Red Dog and Jazz and people like that involved. Gentleman Chris Adams, before he passed away. When I got involved, Chris Adams wasn't involved anymore, but Red Dog and Jazz were the main trainers for the school. And there was a lot of Action Jackson, who's kind of a staple around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, wrestled back in the Sportatorium days, used to wrestle, he used to wrestle Mean Mark Callis, a.k.a. The Undertaker, back in the day and stuff like that. So he was around. I posted about the guy on Twitter recently. His wrestling name was Lance Romance, and Lance Romance helped start a group called the International Players Club. And initially, it was just kind of a NWO-esque type faction, but just we had kind of our own spin on things. We weren't as, I don't know how to explain the International Players Club. Just take that name and think of it, and think how you would feel like an International Players Club would be. And they called me the 7-foot Shadow when I wasn't 7 foot. But we ran a weekly TV program here in Dallas. So we were on like local TV, like Saturday mornings. We ran weekly shows, and at its peak, we were drawing like 300-400 people weekly, and then we would do big events like once every 3 or 4 months, and those were drawing like 700-800 1,000 people a couple times. Full video screens, so you had the entrance video and your own custom music, and like there was a live feed of what was happening in the ring up on it. It was like a full production indie pro wrestling company that ran on a weekly basis, which was unheard of at the time, and even to this day I don't know of anybody that runs weekly like they did and at that quality and fashion. So yeah, that was my beginning days as Shadow. And the Shadow name came about because they had a Lance Romance, who I mentioned before, and they had a guy named Jared Steele. So I couldn't be Lance Steele. Yeah, so I couldn't be Lance Steele. So they're like, you got to come up with another name. And I was like, I want to do Shadow. And Shadow to me was kind of a spin-off of kind of an Undertaker-ish dark gimmick. As it advanced and grew and morphed, I had my own group called the Dark Circle. And Tim Storm, who has, is a big part of the NWA, former NWA world champion for the longest time, both before it was taken over more recently, and then a little bit during and whatnot. He was a part of the group, and then there was a couple other guys, and we were probably the biggest faction in that company. Had feuds with all kinds of different people. Paul London's, he wrestled there and whatnot a lot. Ahmed Johnson and I had a big feud, and he feuded with me in the group and things like that. And so Shadow had a really deep meaning to my early wrestling career. It was probably my biggest and most prominent name that I was using at the time there. And then, like I said, when I started going for an opportunity at TNA, like they used their Explosion stuff kind of as their tryout. They would use it, their talent would work with guys and girls that were trying to come in and get a job. And I think I wrestled a few or 2 or 3 Explosion matches as Shadow. And then by the time I actually got my job with TNA, like my first night working on their weekly pay-per-view program, teaming with Kid Cash, they didn't even say my name. because I was a surprise entrance as Kid Cash's family member. They didn't even specify what my family relations were to him, cousin, nephew, brother, or nothing. They just like, this is Kid Cash's family member, and they didn't have a name on me. So my first, official match, on their main show for TNA was just Kid Cash's relative. And then they were discussing, what to call me, and they were going over different names. And like at one point, they're like, "What is he using now?" And they're like, "Shadow." And they're like, "Okay, just let him Shadow." And then I get somebody didn't like that and wanted to change it. And then I think it was Dutch Mantel was like, "Well, where's he from?" And they were like, "He's from Dallas. He's coming from Dallas." And they're like, "Oh, well, let's call him Dallas." And then that's how Dallas was born.
There you go. Now, you mentioned a couple names there that I do not want to skim over, and
Oh, why not? Why
there's,
not?
there's a couple that are a little controversial in some circles.
What?
One is Ahmed Johnson. You got to work with Ahmed Johnson.
Yeah. Like I said, because PCW was a really cool place and a really cool program running, like I said, running weekly, great crowds weekly, full production. Like it was basically what you saw on TV being produced in Dallas, Texas, in a small, old, renovated movie theater. Not really that small actually, because like I said, we could get about 1,000 people in on the bigger shows. And so I think he saw that and he was like, "Oh man, this is a cool place to be. It's a cool place to work." I was probably one of the biggest guys we had on the roster, just a young kid at the time, and he wanted to work with me. Like he specifically picked me and my group, and ultimately put me over in the end of the feud,
Wow.
which was really cool. And Ahmed's unfortunately, he's known to not be the most easy to work with, but at that time when he came in and wanted to work with me, it was great. It was awesome.
How about that? All good experiences with Ahmed.
Yeah, for me anyway.
Now, the other name is another one that has some controversy surrounding it. You mentioned Gentleman Chris Adams. You got to spend some time around him?
No. That's like I said, when I first started with PCW, he was already gone, and I didn't even know. I didn't even know the story of Gentleman Chris Adams. Like I didn't know, and this will sound bad. Like I didn't know much about Dallas wrestling. I didn't know about the Von Erichs. I didn't know about the Sportatorium and all that stuff. I was a babe in the business who started watching because of Sting and WCW Nitro. So I didn't know the history of pro wrestling as a whole, and especially I didn't know Dallas history. Like again with the Sportatorium, the Von Erichs, even Action Jackson, the time that he was with us to when he was there, and Gentleman Chris Adams and things like that, to which he had his ultimate demise. I don't remember because I don't know. Do you know off the top of your head like when he passed away?
I do not recall.
Okay.
I watched that Dark Side of the Ring, but it's honestly a lot of it's a blank. Most of what I know about Chris Adams, I heard from Jake, who worked with him in Dallas in WCCW
Right.
and had some pretty weird experiences with the guy.
I can only imagine. So yeah, I didn't because when I came in, and this was probably 2001 is when I started working with PCW. Um, then he wasn't there, so I had zero experiences in or around Gentleman Chris Adams.
Now, you're a big guy, and there's always that thing, especially if you're getting trained by some old school folks, which it sounds
Right.
like you were.
Yep.
Like, hey, you're a big guy, you work a certain way,
Right.
and but you are capable of doing these backflips and incredibly acrobatic moves while also being a big guy. What kind of style were you starting out with? Were you doing the fantastic stuff right out of the gate?
I think I was working on it. I mean, everybody's working on new things, and like I said, this was the early 2000s. So yeah, there was an idea of what big men were, but there was also kind of an evolution of the business, which there always is. I mean, been big evolutions in the business, even the last few years. And that's just life. There's always evolutions, but there was mentalities of how big men should be, I guess, to a degree. I was kind of being taught that, but also, like Red Dog and Jazz were the ones who were very influential when I first started at PCW. And I spent most of my time there before I signed with TNA. They were very progressive and it's like, yeah, be a big man and learn to work as a big man, but also you're athletic, so be athletic. Don't hold back on that. So it was one of those things. Like I think I did my first moonsault there at PCW way back in the day, and I never did anything too crazy. Like the moonsault was probably the biggest. Like, oh, look at this giant dude doing a backflip off the top rope. Um, and until I landed on my head in AEW, I'd never landed on my head, and it was just an easy move. But yeah, just the ability to move, not like a lumbering, stumbling big man of the past, having athleticism that I kind of gained through playing football and baseball and basketball and other sports like that, helped me be kind of a hybrid big man. And the Shadow character itself was, in my mind, kind of a hybrid. Yes, I liked the darkness of the Undertaker and what he presented, and that's kind of where Shadow's image was kind of geared at. But I also loved like the amazing athleticism of like Jeff Hardy, because the Hardy Boys and what Jeff could do and was doing at the time, in the early 2000s and things like that. So my mentality behind the Shadow character in my professional wrestling career was not just to be kind of a tall, big, lumbering, blumbling big man, but to be a hybrid of a big man who could do cool stuff like the moonsault. And then the one time I did it, the springboard Van Terminator and TNA and things like that. So to be able to do those things back then kind of helped me move my career forward, when at a time when there weren't a lot of options, because WCW ultimately went out of business. TNA was just starting in the early 2000s, things like that. So there weren't a lot of places to go, and the indies weren't what they, ultimately became with all these super indies and the ability to kind of work and make money just working indies with the ability to travel around the country and the world and things like that. So I think it was a very limited basis time with your idea of where I'm trying to get to at the time specifically was WWF. And then obviously TNA came around, which created a new option for the business, which was great for the business as a whole. So then you started working either towards that or WWF.
Now, according to the research here, I guess Andrew got this from Cage Match. Your first match would have been February 2001. Does that sound correct to you?
My first match where?
It's in Pro Championship Wrestling.
No. We talked about my first match.
What year though, or what date year do you recall?
July 5th, 2000. July 5th, 2000 was the Texas Heat Wave match where yes. I did that. Not too long after that, I wrestled again at the car show that I did, and that was in early 2000. And then I would wrestle periodically for the Southwest Wrestling Federation. And then the breakdown character came about because there was a company down in Corpus called GCCW, Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling, that I would go down there and wrestle for and things like that. And then when I kind of left the Southwest Wrestling Federation before I really branched out and started doing anything at PCW, Professional Championship Wrestling in Dallas, I was traveling around. I did a few shots with Sean's. I can't remember what it was called, but it was Sean's wrestling school. It was his company, maybe RWA. I'm not sure. But then there was a company called RCW that's still around in San Antonio, Texas today. A guy named Brandon Oliver runs it. It's a great program down there in San Antonio. I was there and a part of that very first show ever. So that was doing a lot, like not a lot. I mean, it was indie a lot, where I was working once or twice a month at different places, but leading into my time with PCW.
Now we will pick up the story of your time in TNA and the origins of your time in TNA soon, but right. Or on a future episode. But okay. For right now, we'll close this one out by asking, how did the opportunity now come about with TNA, Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett's promotion, all the way out there in Nashville?
Yeah, like I said, TNA started, it was their first show was out in Alabama or whatnot, but then they transferred everything out to Nashville, the old Asylum, the old Fairgrounds, which I don't think are even there anymore in Nashville. I again, traveling around, and I really started to learn the business from a lot of Shawn Michaels students when I started traveling to Dallas. Because I didn't, backtracking here on my origin story, when I started training with Solo and my friend Jason and whatnot, we were just learning moves. It was like, you beat me up, I beat you up, I beat you up, you beat me up, and somebody ultimately wins the match. And it wasn't until I started traveling with Sean's kids, again, my friend CJ or Jeremy Sage, and we were going up to Dallas for PCW, and they were like, you should learn psychology. And I'm like, what the hell is psychology? I'm an English major. And they're like, no, we're talking about pro wrestling psychology. And I'm like, what is that? And they started teaching me, the ins and outs and kind of the ideas of what pro wrestling as a whole, as a psychological, theatrical event happens, how to do that, what the good guys or the baby faces do, what the heels do, how they get to where they get to, what means what when you do it here and there and everywhere. And they were the ones that really first started kind of introducing me to that. And then obviously working with Red Dog and Jazz and the different, great people that were in Dallas at the time when I started, really kind of gearing in the whole psychology of the business into me. And then as far as TNA is concerned, like I was branching out, going out to Bill Barron's stuff out in Georgia, attempting to get opportunities through his place where AJ Styles even originated with Bill Barron's out there. And, AJ was a big part of TNA, especially the early years. And we were going out there trying to get opportunities, things weren't really panning out. And then the real opportunity came for me with TNA. So a friend of mine who his name's Britt, and he owns like a memorabilia shop here in the Dallas area. And he ran probably the first WrestleCon, and it wasn't like the WrestleCon that exists today. Like he ran one, and this was before like wrestling cons were even a thing, and like sports cons were a thing where you went to sports memorabilia shows and you met sports players and whatnot. Because I don't even think like the movie actors were even into the cons that much at that time. I mean, I didn't follow it, so I didn't know. But the only thing I'd ever heard of was like sports memorabilia shows. Like I don't even know if they were even called cons back then. But he called it WrestleCon, and he started bringing in, because they were doing a full sports memorabilia event, and then he would bring wrestling names in from Terry Taylor's and different people like that. The Missing Link, who was just a really cool dude to meet before he passed away. But he was doing one of them, and I was a local guy, so he was like, "Yeah, just come on out, get you some 8x10s made. I'll let you set up a table." And maybe because of the PCW area, we had fans that knew us from PCW, so they knew me, and they would come out and they would buy some stuff, and I'd make a little bit of money off of that. But he had one of TNA's, because when TNA first started, I think the idea of having the name be TNA is that it does mean total nonstop action, but it's kind of an acronym also for tits and ass.
Yeah.
And I think that was done on purpose, because this was early 2000s before everybody was overly sensitive about everything. But they also had cage dancers. They had girls that literally danced in the cages when guys came out to their matches. And I think that was kind of inspired from Lucha Libre, because Lucha Libre usually has very attractive women dancing stage side when most of their wrestlers come out. So one of the girls, her wrestling name was Lollipop. She was brought into this wrestling con. Or WrestleCon, she came, and everybody's doing a thing. I get to meet Terry Taylor's and Missing Links and several names, different people. He brought some TNA people. I don't remember specifically who was there, but she was there. And then Britt took us all out to dinner one night, and she was asking, she's like, "Have you ever tried to work for TNA?" And I go, "I mean, I've tried, but nothing has panned out." She's like, "Well, get me an 8x10." And again, this was back in the early 2000s. She was like, "Get me a videotape, a VHS." I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." And we had like another day or something like that of the WrestleCon. So I got together one of my 8x10s that I was selling and found like a VHS tape of one of my matches. And I handed it to her, not knowing or thinking anything would actually happen. And she was true to her word, and she took it back to Bob Ryder, who at the time was very influential with TNA and helping them look and see new talent and whatnot. And to her credit, she gave it to Bill Barron, or she gave it to Bob Ryder, and then I guess Bob Ryder contacted Bill Barron's, and I got an email from Bill Barron's, and he was like, "Okay, you're being invited for some tryouts on their Explosion show," and this was mid 2003. And so I started going and doing explosions, and we were driving from Dallas 9.5 hours to Nashville, Tennessee to do these tryout matches. And then in March of 2004, driving out there, I guess they tried to contact me, but I didn't get it because, again, I had cell phone, but I didn't have, access to an email, because you had to have a computer back then to get your email. And I showed up at the asylum in March of 2004, and I was looking at the explosion board, and my name wasn't on there. And then I looked up at the main board, and sure enough, there it is, Shadow, and because they just wrote Shadow because I hadn't had the name change yet, and it was like Shadow and Kid Cash against I think Paul Diamond and Sonny Siaki, or not Paul Diamond, Simon Diamond, Simon Diamond and Sonny Siaki. And as they say, the rest is history.
Holy shit. Can't wait to get into the full story of your time in TNA. And we will
Yeah.
probably do it chronologically so we can really kind of dive in and tell the full story. But are you still in touch with this Lollipop person? She kind of changed your life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't spoken to her in many years. I know I don't know if she's still married, but I know she married like a military guy, had a baby or two with him and whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope she's doing well. I apologize, Lolly. I forgot your real name. It's been a while. Please don't be mad at me if you see this and hear about that. But yeah, she was kind of the person that, like I said, true to her word, took a tape, took a picture, and gave it to the right people and got the ball rolling.
Well, thank you, Lollipop, wherever you are, and
Thanks, Lollipop.
And thank you all for tuning in here. Man, the first episode of the Hawk's Nest is in the books, and the plan
I hope you guys weren't too bored, man.
No, dude, it was awesome getting to hear this story and kind of getting the deep dive on the origins of the Murder Hawk. And again, we will kind of try to maybe, I don't know, maybe chronologically, maybe we'll jump around a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah.
But sort of the loose plan here, folks, is that Lance and I are going to record live every 2 weeks. So we won't be back next Sunday, but maybe the Sunday after that or Monday. It really kind of depends on our schedules and whatnot.
We'll work on it. My schedule's a little all over the place, and that be sure to pay attention, and because we're going to have some guests on here too. It's not just going to be Marcus and I just jibber jabbering about wrestling and everything that I've done in the business. We're going to talk about a little bit of everything, what you like, what you don't like. I just had a badass battle with Mark Briscoe. The little son of a bitch got lucky and bested me. That's okay. I bloodied him up pretty damn good. So we're going to talk all things pro wrestling, my early days in this business. We're going to talk about some AEW. We're going to talk about the things that I like and I don't like. But like I said, we're going to have some guests on here periodically that are going to help join us, from some cool comedians to just some other people in the business. I don't know if we'll be able to get anybody from AEW on here because that's a whole fun process. But there's a lot of good people that we're going to have that are going to come in and be involved with us here on the Hawk's Nest.
Man,
should we tell them what we thought about calling it, but then she took the name?
Yeah, please, by all means, fill them in.
Obviously she owned the rights to it, and she got her own podcast now, Miss Haley Welch and her Hot Tuya, but we were going to call it the Hot Tuya Nest.
And then she just swooped in. Now she's starting a podcast.
She swooped it. Damn it, that girl and her damn Hot Tuya.
Unbelievable.
That's okay. Maybe Haley will come in and join us one day on the Hawk's Nest.
I would love that. I would love. I'm sure she's got some stories. And to Lance's point, we'll have guests on here. We will continue to do like a mailbag thing every once in a while where you guys take control of the show and we'll ask your questions. So stay tuned. Follow Lance on social media. He's at Lance Hoyt on Twitter. Lance_Hoyt on Instagram. And are you on Facebook? Hoyt. Are you on Facebook?
I am, but I kind of keep that one more personal.
Okay. Well, look, if you guys have any questions for Lance and you want to kind of guarantee they get put into the show, follow me on Twitter, Marcus P. D'Angelo, and DM me because that's always the quickest way to make sure that I get a hold of the question. But, man, this was an awesome first episode, dude. I can't wait to do another one here.
Yeah, everybody out there, be sure to tune in because if you don't, remember, everybody dies.
Catch you guys next time right here on the Hawk's Nest.